Yep, yes.
In a Southern California neighborhood, police equipped with armored vehicles and riot gear recently rounded up suspected drug dealers and users. Police departments conduct military-style raids like this across America. And while they seem to be purely local drug busts,
Go back inside. Go back inside.
in fact, police targets are the sometimes unwitting retail ends of global drug networks based in Mexico and supplied by Colombians. Drug-related murders and epidemic corruption in Mexico and along the U.S.-Mexico border highlight the vicious competition among the four main Mexican drug syndicates. At stake is the immense income generated by the illegal narcotics trade. The drug syndicates, according to the U.S. government, make $7 billion a year. That's almost as much as Microsoft earned last year. In the United States, seizures of narcotics and cash show that the far-reaching tentacles of powerful Mexican drug cartels are shaping the face of organized crime. A recent case involving seizures of massive quantities of drugs and money highlights the far-flung influence of one cartel north of the border. It also demonstrates the enormous challenge confronting law enforcement in facing transnational, multi-layered narcotics businesses. That case involved 34-year-old Jorge Castro, who in March pleaded guilty to 2 of 12 federal narcotics charges. In a plea agreement, Castro admitted trafficking in tons of cocaine and tens of millions of dollars. A judge sentenced him to nearly 17 years in prison. Although he was arrested in Los Angeles, Castro is a Mexican citizen. More importantly, according to U.S. authorities, Castro was part of the notorious Mexican drug organization headed by brothers Benjamin and Ramon Arellano Felix. Castro is related to the men. Headquartered in Tijuana, across the border from San Diego, the Arellano Felix organization is said to be one of the most ruthless and powerful crime syndicates in the world. It is believed responsible for the murders of dozens of Mexican prosecutors, judges, police officials, suspected rivals, and journalists. According to Michael Braun of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, Castro took his orders directly from Arellano Felix leaders.
Jorge Castro was the highest-ranking member of the AFO, or the Arellano Felix organization, that was ever arrested on U.S. soil. The Castro organization, Jorge Castro, also known as Jefe, or the boss, he was responsible for the daily operations of a core cell in the Los Angeles area that was responsible for distributing multi-hundreds of kilograms of cocaine all across the United States.
The DEA was one of 6 federal and state agencies that spent 15 months investigating Castro's organization. The investigation led to 50 arrests in Southern California, Georgia, New York, Illinois, and Texas. But the Castro network was only one of many connections to Mexican drug syndicates. This informant, considered reliable by the DEA, says the Arellano Felix group uses numerous operatives like Castro to run U.S. operations.
I think there were 20 to 30 people, more or less.
Doing what?
Lieutenants of the cartel.
Meaning running operations in the United States, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Peter Smith, director of Latin American Studies at the University of California, San Diego, has studied narco-traffickers. He says Castro's distribution network serviced what is essentially a major business enterprise.
They do the things that we would expect corporations to do. They form transnational partnerships when necessary. They vertically integrate their operations when that is advantageous, which would mean coming into the retail market in the United States. They diversify their product lines. The Arellano Felix group not only does cocaine, but it also does methamphetamine in a growing measure, and also transships heroin and marijuana as well. They are willing to make overhead investments to protect their market share. You might call it corruption, you might call it bribery, but it comes back to shipping more goods than they really expect will reach the market, because they expect that usually 10 or 15% of their shipments are going to be caught.
Castro was indicted with 8 Southern California subordinates. Like traditional mob families, several were related to each other. To transport drugs and to avoid detection, they operated on a need-to-know basis, with 2 wings, one responsible for drugs, the other for cash.
The reason that these organizations are highly compartmentalized, I mean, it's just smart business sense on their part. If one of these folks gets taken down, they really can't identify anyone other than, those that they work with on a day-to-day basis.
The top men in Castro's organization did not call attention to themselves. They lived middle-class lives in suburban Southern California neighborhoods like this. One key associate, Luis Valenzuela, now a fugitive, lived in this house across the street from a neighborhood watch sign. He owned a restaurant in a nondescript shopping mall. The organization used houses and businesses in the LA area as temporary warehouses for drugs or money. Castro workers used vehicles often equipped with hidden compartments to transport drugs within the U.S. and money to Mexico. Often the hiding places were activated through a combination of switches. L.A. Deputy Sheriff Djscience, who was part of the task force that investigated Castro, demonstrated an elaborately constructed hiding place. He asked us to conceal his face.
If you touch it, you're hitting metal, you think you're hitting the roof of the vehicle.
It looks just like the roof.
It looks exactly like a showroom roof.
How difficult was this to detect?
Very difficult. 4 hours to find this one.
And what was in here?
40 kilos of coke. We had 5 of these units, 8 kilos per metal tray.
Braun says the well-financed traffickers have been helped by the availability of state-of-the-art communications technology.
They're using cell phones, they're using fax machines, they're using pagers to communicate. Again, some of the cell phones are encrypted, some aren't. They go to great lengths, okay, to make their operation as precise as they can.
To investigate Castro and his network, agents got federal court orders to wiretap 29 phones. They listened to hundreds of phone calls. Suspicious traffickers often spoke in crudely disguised code.
The girls are very pretty to go to the dance.
Girls, the word used by Juan Carlos Perez Lopez, one of those indicted, described cocaine.
Yes, because they told me it was an hour and a half.
An hour and a half was 150 kilograms of cocaine. Some calls were ominous. In one, Jorge Castro seemed to order 2 murders.
You go and invite that girl to go out somewhere and pick her up and kill her.
Police say they don't know if Castro's organization actually carried out the hits. But as with other organized crime groups, according to this informant, violence and intimidation were common.
Was Castro or his organization responsible for any murders?
Yes. I don't know which ones.
In the United States or in Mexico?
In both places.
Over drug-related disagreements?
Yes. They're called adjustments of accounts.
Adjustments of accounts. Someone owed someone money and didn't pay them, or drugs and didn't pay them?
Correct.
Wiretaps often led police officials to stakeouts. Traffickers commonly exchanged money and drugs in public areas, such as this shopping center parking lot in Ontario, California. Police surveillance video of the lot in January 1998 shows a common technique, switching cars. A courier gets out of one car and gets into the passenger side of a nearby vehicle. At the same time, a man with a baseball cap, later convicted as a Castro associate, gets into the first car. Both cars leave, the switch is made. As drug wholesalers, the Castro organization often used gangs to serve as vast retail networks. Castro's group commonly sold the narcotics on consignment to gang leaders. The Castro investigation also led to the arrests in mid-1998 of these 3 men, whom authorities consider links between the Castro organization and street gangs. The men are charged with possessing more than 600 pounds of cocaine. Police say they were led to the men after a wiretapped conversation. All three have pleaded not guilty to drug charges and to allegations that they have ties to two gangs, a Santa Ana, California street gang and the powerful Mexican Mafia, which is a U.S. prison-based gang. Prosecutor Howard Gundy says drug syndicates in Mexico use members of the Mexican Mafia as distribution agents.
They'll contract with a member of the Mafia, who then uses individuals in criminal street gangs for the actual legwork and the muscle work that's involved in moving these large quantities of cocaine. There'll be the mules and the enforcers and so forth.
But despite those arrests and the arrests of Castro and his associates, drug distribution has continued. This March, police mounted an anti-drug raid in the same gang's community, Santa Ana. At the time of Castro's arrest, the U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles declared, "The indictment of Castro and his co-defendants will significantly disrupt the domestic operations of one of Mexico's most notorious drug trafficking operations." But this informant says the Arellano Felix organization quickly recovered.
Always when there's people at this level, when they are the bosses like this, they always have someone else. So that they're there. They have those people.
Has Castro been replaced?
He has to be replaced. He probably already has been.
The availability and price of cocaine have also not changed appreciably since the Castro arrest.
The logic of the drug war has been that if you interdict and harass and stop shipments enough, the price of the cocaine will go up so high that people will stop buying it. We know that the prices have been going down over the last 10 or 15 years, that they're staying down, and that the best indicator of a real change in the situation would come from cocaine prices. We are not seeing a sharp increase in prices.
We're doing the best we can with what we've got. Again, we're keeping a cap on it. And without local, state, and federal law enforcement focusing efforts on drug enforcement, you tell me, what do you think it would be like out on the street? It would be a lot worse than it is now.
The federal war on drugs costs $17 billion a year. Despite occasional victories, such as the assault on the Castro organization, soldiers in the war, as well as critics, agree that as long as there's a strong demand for narcotics and the ability to pay, the drug trade and the growth of organized crime will continue.
Mexico's war on drugs. A new round of drug-related killings erupted in the Mexican cities of Tijuana and Mexicali last week. 11 people were killed, including the regional director of Mexico's intelligence agency. We have a report on the successes and setbacks in the Mexican government's fight against drugs. The reporter is Jeffrey Kay of KCET Los Angeles.
The state of Guerrero in southwest Mexico is best known for Acapulco, the jewel of Mexico's Riviera. But inland and up in the rugged and inhospitable Sierra Madre Mountains, there's a whole different world. This is the heartland of Mexico's drug country. Scattered in the valleys below, miles from paved roads, are tens of thousands of acres of opium poppies and marijuana crops. In the past 18 months, the Mexican government has intensified its assault on the drug trade and official corruption. These days, more than 20,000 troops patrol Mexico's mountains and countryside on counter-drug search and destroy missions. Near the small Indian village of Ixtlayotla, soldiers destroyed a bumper crop of marijuana concealed in a cornfield.
Right here you can see they have one plant of marijuana right here.
Right.
One of corn, one of marijuana, one of corn. Right. I'm sure.
The Mexican military claims that in the last year and a half, it has destroyed more than 190 square miles of illegal drug crops. That's an area the size of the city of Tucson. The government is eager to show off its drug war victories. In a rare interview, Mexico's Secretary of Defense, Army General Gerardo Vega, explained the increased role of the military in law enforcement.
No es un concepto militar, The concept of national security in our country is not just a military concept or a law enforcement concept. For us, national security involves everything, including political, economic, social, and military aspects. Narco-trafficking is not just part of organized crime, but rather we see it as a social problem that affects all our countrymen who are involved in it.
Mexican authorities have scored dramatic successes. The police and army have captured some of the nation's most notorious organized crime figures. The biggest prizes were the arrest this March of Benjamin Arellano Felix and the killing by police a month earlier of his brother Ramon. The siblings ran Mexico's most powerful drug gang, responsible for a wave of violence in northern Mexico. Increasingly, the army is playing an active role in going after drug kingpins.
La última actividad es combatir a la delincuencia organizada.
We combat organized crime, developing and collecting intelligence to capture crime bosses. We do this to support the Attorney General. What we do is develop intelligence and information, and with the means we have, we then act.
On the walls of the Defense Ministry, trophies, personal items seized from Mexico's most wanted narco-traffickers, underscore the involvement of the armed forces in the drug war. That involvement grew in recent years because of the military's reputation as less corrupt than other Mexican institutions. Corruption ruined countless criminal cases over the years, according to officials with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Errol Chavez, DEA special agent in charge of the San Diego division, has had long experience with Mexican authorities.
Everything we had seemed to be given to the narcotics trafficker almost immediately. We provided them with books, photographs, license plate numbers, telephone numbers. We provided them with some specific details on pending trafficking operations that the Arellano Felix organization was going to participate in, and as a result, we would get information back from our informants that the Arellano Felix organization had everything that we provided to the Mexican officials.
In Mexico City, U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Davidow says things are now different.
The confidence level on both sides has gone up dramatically as the Mexican government has been able to demonstrate that intelligence information that comes to it will not be leaked in compromise an investigation, perhaps an investigation in the United States.
One change is an effort to professionalize Mexican law enforcement. There are tougher standards for training and recruitment of anti-drug warriors. A centerpiece of that effort is the Training Academy of Mexico's version of the FBI, known by its acronym AFI or AFI, the Agency for Federal Investigation. The school's curriculum is heavy on commando training. But along with police training has come an emphasis on integrity. Not only must federal police recruits meet physical requirements, they must also pass a new polygraph test and a background check. The new tests eliminate 50% of the applicants. Mottos on a cafeteria wall invoke the dignity of public service and respect for the law.
Our operations are compartmentalized and secure.
Genaro Garcia, the director of the AFI, says sensitive information is now limited to a small number of federal law enforcement officials.
I think that part of our success in combating organized crimes has been the creation of effective anti-crime units in our structures. And we have also compartmentalized our work, staffed by professional people of conviction who are vetted and who have new technology.
Reforms in the ranks of Mexican police agencies are helping span the chasm of distrust that long existed between Mexican and U.S. law enforcement. One example of increased binational cooperation could be seen at a restricted section of Acapulco's airport. Mexican pilots who fly anti-drug patrols receive night vision training and equipment funded by the U.S. government. This year, the U.S. provided Mexico with $12 million in counter-narcotics assistance, triple the amount it provided 3 years ago. But there are limits to full cooperation, since U.S. law enforcement officials trust only a select few of their Mexican counterparts. U.S. authorities say that in Mexico City, there's an island of trustworthy government officials in a sea of corruption.
Oh, I think that island gets bigger every month as the comfort level of our law enforcement with their law enforcement, the exchange of information. One reason that one reason comfort level goes up is that as we have more experience with people, and we know that the information that was passed last month wasn't leaked, then that pool or that island increases.
While federal officials are proud of their reforms and the arrests of top drug kingpins, by all accounts, changes are slow in coming at the state and local levels. In Mexico's towns and villages, police corruption is still widespread. In the southern Mexican village of Vereda, one of the biggest events of the year is the rodeo. Hundreds of people come to watch young cowboys test their mettle as bull riders. But to hear the locals tell it, fighting corruption here may be as difficult as riding a bucking bull. Beer distributor Francisco Benitez says the local police are always on the take.
They want money, you know.
They want money?
Sure, if you don't get money, you don't have any help. If you don't have money, they never help us. They only looking for the money.
Has this happened to you?
Sure.
Mexican cops are notoriously underpaid. In Vereda, the 5-man police force is unpaid. Not only that, Comandante Alberto Avellino says his militia must buy their own weapons and uniforms.
Here we don't have anything. We are volunteers supporting our community. When someone tells us about an assault or robbery, we go. We put on our uniforms and check it out.
Avellino says he and his men are no match for the drug traffickers.
They have the force, the power. That's because they got the cash. And us, nothing.
One city rocked by the power and wealth of the drug cartels is Tijuana, right across the border from San Diego. As the home base of the Arellano Felix organization, Tijuana became a notorious hub of corruption and drug violence over the last 10 years. Despite the death of one Arellano Felix brother and the arrest of another, U.S. authorities say their organization is still active. The U.S. Treasury Department has named 9 Tijuana businesses as money laundering fronts for the cartel. They include a prominent drugstore chain and the Oasis Beach Resort, a hotel 20 miles south of Tijuana. The active businesses show the continuing power of the drug cartel, according to Tijuana human rights activist Victor Clark.
If you don't touch those big networks that is the infrastructure of all these people, you only are arresting the visible delinquency, those whose names are known by the public, those whose names are on the media. Those are the street operators. But what about the others, the white-collar crimes? They have not been arrested, not even touched, not even mentioned, and I doubt if they are going to be arrested soon.
Mexican drug warriors say they are investigating the cartel's financial infrastructure. But perhaps their more formidable challenge is the nation's most pressing social ill, poverty. The state of Guerrero is not only one of the country's most productive areas for illegal crops, it's also one of the poorest in Mexico. Here, peasant farmers sow and plow cornfields just as their ancestors did hundreds of years ago. In the village of Tlatlokitepec, residents say farmers cultivate illegal drugs in the mountains to escape poverty, malnutrition, and economic neglect.
They do it out of necessity. I'm against drugs, but I think most people do it out of necessity, not because they want to. Corn just doesn't make it. You lose a lot. You spend a lot of money, but a crop like that gives you little in return.
That's a huge contrast with the nation's most lucrative illegal crop, opium poppies. Opium gum, the raw material for heroin, is worth thousands of times more than any other cash crop grown in the same area. Defense Minister Vega acknowledges that the battle against illegal drugs requires as much an economic as a military solution.
El problema es que cuánto cuesta una hectárea de jitomate y cuánto cuesta una hectárea.
The problem is, how much does a hectare of tomatoes and how much does a hectare of marijuana cost? And that difference hasn't been resolved in the United States, Mexico, Colombia, or anywhere. That's why I say this has to be resolved in some global way. It's a worldwide issue. That's my personal opinion.
As Mexican soldiers fight the drug war one plant at a time, ready markets for the illegal crops await in both the U.S. and Mexico. So there is little sign of the smoke from Mexico's drug war clearing up anytime soon.